Everyone tells you the same thing. If you want to lose belly fat, you have to run. So you force yourself onto a treadmill, pounding your knees, gasping for air, and somehow that stubborn fat around your waist barely changes. Here's the uncomfortable truth most fitness advice avoids. Running harder does not automatically mean burning more visceral fat, and in many cases, it does the opposite. This video is about walking versus running and which one actually burns deep, dangerous visceral fat, the fat wrapped around your organs that raises your risk of diabetes, heart disease, and hormone problems. If you clicked hoping for a simple answer like running burns more calories, forget that idea right now. Calories are only part of the story, and focusing on them is why so many people stay stuck with belly fat for years. Here's the contrarian reality. Visceral fat doesn't respond best to intensity. It responds to signals, hormonal signals, stress signals, and energy availability signals. Running sends one very loud signal to your body. Walking sends a completely different one. And one of those signals tells your body to let go of visceral fat. The other often tells it to hold on tighter, especially if you're already stressed, underslept, or dieting. That's why you see this pattern all the time. People who run regularly still have stubborn belly fat. Meanwhile, others who barely ever work out but walk daily slowly lose inches around their waist without destroying their joints or motivation. This isn't about which exercise is harder, it's about which one your biology is willing to cooperate with. In the next part, you'll understand the fat-burning system your body actually uses, how movement goes in, how hormones filter the signal, and why the output is either visceral fat loss or fat storage. Once you see this, the walking versus running debate becomes painfully obvious. To understand walking versus running for visceral fat, you have to stop thinking like a calorie counter and start thinking like your body. Your body runs a simple system. Input is the movement you do, walking, jogging, running, intervals, the total weekly volume, and how often you repeat it. Filter is what that movement means to your nervous system and hormones. Same calories burned can produce totally different signals depending on intensity, recovery, sleep, stress, and whether you're underfueled. Output is the result you actually care about. Does your body pull energy from visceral fat, or does it protect it and pull from easier places first? Here's the key. Visceral fat is expensive for your body to hold long term, but it's also valuable in the short term because it can rapidly provide energy and inflammatory signals during stress. So your body doesn't just release it because you moved more. It releases it when the filter says, "We're safe. We have consistency. We have enough energy coming in. We can afford to lower the emergency storage." That's why intensity is a double-edged sword. Running can be powerful because it's a strong input. Done right, it improves fitness fast and can increase total weekly energy burn. But it can also spike the threat side of the filter if you stack it on top of life stress, low sleep, and aggressive dieting. When that happens, the output often becomes cravings, compensation, lower daily movement outside the workout, and stubborn belly fat that refuses to budge. Walking, on the other hand, is a gentler input that often improves the filter. Lower stress load, better recovery, more consistency, and less backlash. That can create the kind of environment where visceral fat is finally negotiable. Now, here's the research proof that shows why harder isn't automatically better. A randomized controlled trial from Duke University Medical Center, published in the Journal of Applied Physiology, assigned 175 sedentary, overweight men and women to different exercise doses and intensities for about 6 to 8 months. One group did a low amount of moderate intensity exercise, basically walking about 12 miles per week. Another did the same weekly amount at vigorous intensity, jogging, and another did a higher amount at vigorous intensity, jogging about 20 miles per week. They measured abdominal fat with CT scans. The control group gained visceral fat, but doing the modest weekly exercise at either intensity prevented that visceral fat gain, and the highest amount group actually reduced visceral fat by about 6.9% on average. Translation in plain language, you don't need to punish your body to protect your waistline, and the combo that wins is consistent weekly volume plus a filter your body doesn't fight. Now, let's turn this into steps you can actually follow, starting with the move that looks too easy to matter, yet changes the visceral fat game for most people. Step 1 is the move almost everyone underestimates, and that's exactly why it works. Walking on purpose. Not casual steps here and there, not pacing while scrolling your phone. I'm talking about deliberate, repeatable walking that your body can predict and recover from. Here's the what. You walk at a pace where you can speak in full sentences, but wouldn't want to sing. Breathing is elevated, posture is tall, arms swing naturally. This isn't a stroll, and it's not a grind. Here's the why. Visceral fat is tightly linked to chronic stress hormones, especially cortisol. When cortisol speeds elevated, your body treats belly fat like a survival tool, not excess storage. Running, for many people, adds another spike on top of an already overloaded system. Walking does the opposite. It lowers baseline stress while still increasing daily energy demand. That combination matters more than intensity. When stress comes down and energy use goes up in a controlled way, your body finally gets the message that it can afford to release visceral fat. Now here's the part most people miss. Walking doesn't just burn calories during the walk, it raises your total daily movement without triggering compensation. People who walk consistently don't crash on the couch afterward. They move more for the rest of the day without thinking about it. That extra movement is invisible, but it's powerful. Here's the how. Start with 30 to 45 minutes per day, most days of the week. You can split it into 2 shorter walks if needed, but at least one should be continuous. Walk outdoors if possible. Natural light and varied terrain amplify the stress-reducing signal. If you're short on time, anchor walking to something you already do. Walk after meals. Walk during phone calls. Walk instead of scrolling. And here's the rehook most people don't expect. If walking is so effective, why do some people still need running to lose visceral fat? Because walking sets the foundation, but it doesn't flip the metabolic switch that decides how your body handles harder effort. That switch comes from how intensity is used, not avoided. And that's where step 2 either accelerates fat loss or completely cancels it. Step 2 is where most people sabotage their progress without realizing it. It's not running itself that's the problem. It's how running is layered on top of walking. Here's the what. Running should act like a signal, not a punishment. Short, controlled doses that tell your body, we're getting fitter, without screaming, we're under attack. Here's the why. High-intensity running spikes stress hormones by design. That's not bad if your body has room to absorb the signal. But if running replaces walking, recovery, or sleep, the filter flips from adaptation to protection. That's when visceral fat becomes harder to lose, not easier. The mistake looks like this. People stop walking because they ran today. They sit more the rest of the day. Appetite jumps, sleep quality drops, and the net fat loss signal disappears. Instead, running should sit on top of a walking base, not replace it. Here's the how. Limit running to 2 or 3 short sessions per week. Keep most runs in the moderate zone, where breathing is hard but controlled. Save all-out sprints for brief bursts or occasional sessions, not daily grind. A simple rule that protects visceral fat loss: if running makes you feel wired, irritable, or wiped out the next day, it's too much for your current filter. Now here's the invisible switch most people never notice. Running only helps visceral fat loss when it improves insulin sensitivity instead of increasing stress load. When insulin sensitivity improves, your body becomes more willing to pull energy from stored fat between meals and overnight. But insulin sensitivity doesn't improve from chaos. It improves from predictable stress plus predictable recovery. That's why people who run hard inconsistently often look leaner everywhere except the belly. Their body is adapting for performance, not fat release. And here's the setup for the biggest secret. Walking creates safety. Running adds fitness, but neither of them decides visceral fat loss on their own. There's one variable that tells your body whether walking and running will actually touch belly fat, or just make you tired and hungry. That's step 3. Step 3 is the piece almost no one connects to walking or running, yet it determines whether visceral fat actually moves. Fuel timing and recovery. Not extreme dieting, not cutting carbs, not fasting longer and longer. Here's the what. Your body releases visceral fat when it believes energy availability is stable. That belief is shaped by when and how you fuel around movement. Here's the why. Visceral fat is tightly tied to survival signaling. If your body senses repeated energy threats, hard workouts followed by long under-fueled periods, it protects belly fat even while other fat disappears. That's why people often lose weight but keep the gut. Walking works well fasted because it doesn't threaten energy balance. Running often doesn't. When you run hard without adequate fuel or recovery, cortisol stays elevated longer, insulin sensitivity drops temporarily, and your body prioritizes refilling glycogen and protecting visceral fat. Here's the how. On walking-only days, normal meals are enough, no special fueling required. On running days, especially moderate to hard sessions, eat a balanced meal with protein and carbohydrates within a few hours before or after. This doesn't cancel fat loss, it protects the filter so the output stays fat release, not stress defense. Sleep is the multiplier here. 6 hours or less turns even perfect training into a visceral fat holding pattern. 7 to 9 hours lowers baseline cortisol and improves how your body uses both walking and running. Here's the biggest secret most people never hear. Visceral fat loss is not about choosing walking or running, it's about earning intensity. Walking earns your right to run. Running without walking and recovery creates resistance. When walking volume is high, stress is managed, and fuel is timed intelligently, running becomes a powerful accelerator instead of a blocker. Now everything you've heard snaps together, and that brings us to the rule that decides which side you end up on. Here's the rule that decides everything. Visceral fat is released only when your body feels safe enough to let it go. Walking builds that safety. Running challenges it. Fuel and sleep decide whether the challenge turns into adaptation or defense. When you walk consistently, you lower stress, raise daily movement, and send a steady signal that energy demand is predictable. When you layer in controlled running, you improve fitness and insulin sensitivity without overwhelming the system. When you fuel and recover properly, the filter stays open, and the output becomes visceral fat loss instead of compensation. That's how the pieces merge. Walk most days. Run a few times per week on top of walking, not instead of it. Eat to support training, not to punish yourself. Sleep like fat loss actually matters. Here's the fast recap. Walking does the heavy lifting for belly fat by fixing the hormonal environment. Running works only when it's dosed and recovered from correctly. The body doesn't respond to suffering, it responds to consistency and safety. If you've been running hard and wondering why your waist hasn't changed, this isn't a motivation problem, it's a signal problem. If you've been walking and doubting whether it's enough, now you know why it works. Apply this system for a few weeks and measure your waist, not just the scale. That's where visceral fat tells the truth. And remember, this video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Talk to a qualified clinician for personal guidance.